The jam company started when my mother had this jar of strawberry jalapeno jam on her counter. And I was like, wow, that's really good. I was like, I'd like to take this to the farmer's market. Do you have a recipe? So she gave me the recipe, sold out the first day. I think we brought a case. The next week we brought 3 cases and the same thing. And then we just started adding flavors and it grew like that very organically.
Have you found any inspiration from like those bigger entrepreneurs that built these massive worldwide brands?
J.M. Smucker was selling jam and jelly in these kind of stone crocks when he started off the back of a wagon, and now it's everywhere. We've been in Whole Foods or Publix on the shelves next to these guys. That feels like a huge feather in your cap.
What's been your major success in co-packing?
You cut your teeth on making the product and understanding the science. And then you start to become a logistics guy. You start wearing all these hats that you didn't even know you were ever going to have to put on.
Yeah, that's entrepreneurship.
But you don't realize it in the time. You're just getting up and going to work. But when I really sit back and look at like all the products we've made, the places that we've gone, the people that have been our customers, that's a big win too. That's a fun piece.
Welcome to the XPLR.NASH Podcast. We are talking about co-packing today. We're talking about restaurant operations. We're talking about failures, successes, and we're also going to be talking about some food science. That's why I'm wearing this shirt. I want to talk about some food science today. And how do you figure out the calculation of how to heat a pepper at a certain degree to get this hot sauce variety? So we're going to get deep into it. And joining us today on the podcast is Gary Barron. Is that how you say your last name?
That is exactly right.
Gary, thank you so much for coming onto the show. So go ahead and just give a brief description of what you do, because you're a busy man.
So I own a restaurant in Berry Hill, Farmstead Nashville, formerly Nashville Jam Company. I have a co-packing facility just north of Nashville, and we make jams, jellies, mustards, ketchups, barbecue sauces, hot sauces, all kinds of things for restaurants in the Nashville area, small businesses, chains of restaurants that are nationwide. We do a lot of different things right here in Middle Tennessee. I am a busy guy. I say that I am an entrepreneur with ADHD. So something pops in my head and I just try to create it and run with it. So
you also have a farm out in Lebanon.
We do,
and so that's a relatively new thing, isn't it?
It's new. It's actually kind of reemerged. So it started that way in the beginning. And how the Nashville Jam Company started was there was a recession in 2008. I took a pretty good hit financially.
What type of industry were you in prior to the restaurant world and to the co-packing world? I
sold electrical equipment to electrical utilities like Nashville Electric Service, Middle Tennessee Electric, Cumberland EMC, across Tennessee and Kentucky. I sold equipment to those power providers that everybody pays their electric bill to.
So was it like transmitters? Was it?
It was everything
type of
from
like cable, like, okay.
Underground power cable, overhead utility cable, every steel poles, just about everything that a utility possibly uses, cross arms. Now that same company sells transformers and all kinds of stuff, but we did a lot. We did a lot of business with utilities, and in 2000,
were most of those products American made at that time, or were we outsourcing those products to other countries?
A lot of those products are American made. There is some stuff that was coming from overseas at that time. Some of it was coming from overseas and then assembled here, but the majority of it really, in the electric utility world, American made is very kind of
needed,
blue collar kind of American, get your hands dirty kind of mentality. And they like to buy American goods. And that's where most of those products came from. Most of the companies I represented were here in the United States and manufactured their products here in the United States.
So the recession happened in 2008. Did you end up losing that sales position, or did you like, okay, I need to step down because the market right now is so tough?
Well, I continued to do both for a while. And what happened was a lot of the material that I sold was related to infrastructure, right? And prior to that, we were experiencing a ton of growth in this area. So people were building and putting in developments like crazy. So if you go into, say, a real estate development, you notice that there's pad mounted transformers and all of that stuff already in the ground. Well, when it slowed down, all of that stuff was out there. All of these utilities had purchased more material than they could use. And then even when it started coming back, they had so much inventory of, let's just say transformers was one thing, transformers. And then these subdivisions were already built out, just waiting for people to buy these lots. And so it took a while for that to get, actually, after the market even corrected, it took a while for that business to come back. So it was a long, slow cycle of getting things back together. And in that time when I was like trying to hide vehicles in garages so the repo man wouldn't come, I came across this article about growing specialty heirloom tomatoes. So I got on a tractor and started planting tomatoes and started taking those tomatoes to farmers markets. Back then we did like, I think 7 farmers markets a week. We were taking tomatoes. Then with the extra tomatoes, we were making fresh salsa. The jam company started when my mother, she had this jar of strawberry jalapeno jam on her counter. And I popped it open like you do when you go to your mom's house, and I probably stuck my finger right in it. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's really good. I was like, I'd like to take this to the farmer's market. You have a recipe. So she gave me the recipe. First flavor we ever offered at any of those farmers markets was the strawberry jalapeno. Sold out the first day. I think we brought a case. And next week we brought 3 cases and the same thing. And then we just started adding flavors. And then we took that from, at the time there was a cottage law where you could make stuff at home and sell at farmers markets.
So let's talk about that, the cottage law just for a second. And then, so what is a cottage law, just in case our consumers or our audience don't know what that is?
Since the time that I got involved, they've changed a couple of different times. At the time that I got involved, you actually had to have your home inspected to be able to make stuff there to sell to the public. Now I think they've changed even a little bit more where you can kind of make stuff, but you have to label that product is
made in a home kitchen.
Made at home, non-inspected kitchen. And there's certain products that you can make at home.
Like cookies, like everyone's doing cookies or like baked goods.
So what they like you to do if you're going to do that is something that's what they call non-potentially hazardous, like cookies, baked goods, jams and jellies fall into that category actually. Pickles, things like that do not, because they're acidified food products. And we'll talk about some of this food science in a little bit and why these things are important, pHs and water availability and those things. But those are the things that especially the federal government does not like you to make at home. Yeah. There's a lot of guidelines when it comes to acidified food products and the education you also have to be able to make those things and sell them to the public.
Okay. So let's touch base real quick about the sales job with the electricity stuff. What is one piece of advice that you would give to an up and coming salesperson that you learned during that time?
So when you're a salesperson, you're never selling whatever it is you're selling. You're selling yourself, right? So it's developing relationships is far more important than whatever cog that is that you're selling. So if someone feels comfortable, when I would go on sales calls, I didn't talk about what it was I was selling. I would look around whoever's office I was in and say, is that your son playing baseball? And find common ground and then allow them to talk. And then I would leave without saying anything. And the next time I showed up, we would talk again. And then eventually you talk about what it is you're there for, but not until they feel comfortable with you. A lot of these people, if you're selling something to somebody, especially business to business, this is their business. They know it better than you know it. So to come in with an attitude of, hey, I've got this thing for you, they may be like, I don't know. But if you get to know someone and they keep showing up, and this is kind of how I buy things from people to this day. I'm kind of a hard sell at first, but if somebody keeps showing up, I'm like, wow, you know what? Maybe I'm going to listen. And it's not giving up. A lot of people think that they've been beaten the first time they show up and get a no, or the second time they show up and get a no. But if you really want something, you think about it like with a let's talk about with dating, right? When you're courting somebody, if you have a bad date and you really want to date that person, you still try to ask them on a second date, right? So I kind of look at it like that. Like, if you really want to do this, if you want to work with these people, you're going to keep showing up and you're going to become friends before you ever sell anything.
Yeah, that's good advice. So with that in mind, you start selling the tomatoes and the jams at local farmers markets. What are your thoughts on the farmers markets in Middle Tennessee right now? Is there something missing?
I don't think that they are as great as they were when I first started, say, 15 years ago. There is something missing. There's a lot of people putting a lot of effort into a lot of these markets, and some of the smaller satellite, I'm not going to name any.
You guys know, if you live in Nashville, you know the satellite markets.
I don't want to get blackballed from any communities either.
Yeah.
But some of the bigger markets, they've lost something, which used to be kind of a draw years ago. Everybody would go to the farmer's market. 15 years ago, the sales at some of the big central farmers markets were insane. Now, I don't know if it's problems with parking or just stuff going on downtown. They've seemed to have lost some of their luster. And I don't know how, I'm a part of some of those still, and I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what to do to fix it.
I guess some of my thoughts, and I'm thinking more of the neighborhood farmers market, because like the Franklin's farmers market kills it.
Yes.
They kills it.
Absolutely.
The Nashville farmers market kills it. Some of these neighborhood ones, like I don't know if it's the draw of the vendors or if it's, I think they're offering good vendors, but the thing I'm finding at a lot of these local farmers markets is they actually have no farmers there. And,
well, there you go.
I grew up in farming and I understand that world. and there's some of them, like they may have one produce farmer, but like when I'm going to a farmer's market, I want a meat supplier. I want produce, but I'm going to the farmer's market for meat primarily.
And
I think there's a lack of butchers in this city because there's a massive lack of butchers compared to the population. And so maybe that's it. There's some really good butchers in town, Smoking Oats, and a few of these other vendors in town, Porter Road Butcher. But like when I think of like Amish farmers markets up north, it's a whole different game from a produce standpoint, meat standpoint, and a vendor standpoint.
Well, I agree. Some of these farmers markets have started to feel more like flea markets than they are farmers markets. Yep. You have makers, right? And I guess I would fall into that category. However, I feel like that I'm a maker in
a
product and agricultural realm. Like jam and jelly and salsa is something that you expect to find at a farmer's market. I don't know that wind chimes are something that I think fits in a farmer's market. And when you lose, people want to get to know the people that are growing their produce, their meat, all of it. You named Nashville and Franklin. The Murfreesboro market on the square is equally just as fantastic.
And that's a market I haven't been to because there's so many different options for the markets.
Right.
Also, I'm
go check that one out because it's fantastic.
The Nolensville one's really good too, especially with the cheese vendors there. And there's a cheese I've only found at the Nolensville Farmers Market. It's a blue cheese that's aged in Kentucky caves, and it is remarkable.
Is it Kinney's?
I think so. Yeah.
It's Kinney's cheese.
Yeah.
So those guys, and this is the thing. So the quality of the vendor definitely impacts the quality of the market.
Yep.
And I think maybe and there's also a financial piece to that as well. If you're showing up and you're not really making the money to cover your expenses, sometimes you better, maybe the market move or change to a different date or something. It's hard to keep really good quality people that have a draw if they're not selling anything at that market. So then I think some of these people that run these markets get desperate and they fill it with whatever they can. Instead of, go ahead and putting it out to pasture, so to speak. Moving it to a different day or a different location or something. If you're competing with another market that maybe has more, just think about those things. And if it's not the kind of output and turnout and the people, if the vendors aren't happy with what they're spending, if they're spending 4 or 5 hours somewhere.
Yeah. And then their booth fees could be $250.
Right. And they're not covering that. Right. It's not worth it for them to do that. So sometimes you just have to let it die.
So back to your story with farmers markets, you were selling the tomatoes, and then you were selling the jams and jellies. So where was the evolution from then to becoming a co-packing facility?
So the evolution was this. It started at home, and I was really starting to outgrow what we were able to produce out of a home kitchen. So I started looking for somewhere else to do this. And at that time, lady, kind of a mentor of mine, fantastic food science whiz, Sue Sykes, got a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture to build this kitchen, which is just for producing shelf-stable sauce type stuff. It right off the campus of Cumberland University. It was Cumberland Culinary Center.
Over in Lebanon? Okay. And
that is where we moved, which gave us, at the time, we were the largest producer there, and we stayed there for several years and then moved into our own. At that time, we were making stuff for ours, but we started co-packing there for other people.
So was that culinary center more of like a commissary for other vendors coming in too, or were you guys the primary holder of the space?
Well, at the time there was like 5 of us. Okay. However, because of food safety stuff, you were never there with anybody else.
Okay.
There was never anybody else's products being run. So you took over for that day or series of days. Everything was very scheduled. Nobody else was, and with the FSMA stuff that happened under Obama, everybody's checking in, there's signed logs. There was a lot of, it was very, very structured. So it wasn't like there's some of these other commissaries where there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
When we were there, it was Nashville Jam products or somebody that we were co-packing for. Okay. And really learned a lot, and then kind of outgrew there, and then moved just north of Nashville. And now we do stuff for lots of large restaurant chains and local mom and pops. And that the funny that, we had a kind of a conversation about this off camera, but what got us into it is not really what's carrying us now. Jam and jelly was our bread and butter. Or was our bread and jam, I guess.
Pun intended. Yeah.
Pun intended. But it moved into, and so when I said the friendship thing, going back to the sales piece, people are like, well, how did you get all of these accounts? Well, a lot of my friends in the Nashville market were chefs or culinarians who worked in hotels or restaurants, or worked in a hotel and restaurant that was actually carrying a Nashville Jam product. And I got to know them. And then when they went to, let's just say, huge restaurant chain X, they had a need for something and said, hey, Gare, can you put this in a jar for us? Or can you put this in a 5-gallon bucket for us? And it grew like that very organically, especially at the time. The Omni Hotel was like our first big break. It was huge. They were the flagship hotel in Nashville in 2014, and everybody else that was in the hotel business was going to see what they were doing. And we were prominently displayed on Kitchen Notes breakfast bar. All of a sudden the phone started ringing off the hook. That led to distribution deals with other food service people. The Creation Gardens or IWCs or Cisco's of the world. And it really mushroomed, but still all of that talk about, I know a guy is really how it's grown. And so it's all relationships.
So if a business were to contact you now and they're like, "Hey, Gary, I want a hot sauce, I want a barbecue sauce, and I want a mustard, and I want my own packaging." What are the processes and steps of that whole pipeline?
So it can happen a couple different ways. It can be a product that, say, we develop together. You give me an idea of what it is you're wanting to produce, and then I can put my pen to paper and come up with maybe a generic version of what it is. Maybe it's a recipe that you already have, right? So then I'm going to take just some simple parameters, make sure that it's able to be made shelf stable, that we can put this in a jar and then it's going to have, in at least a year shelf life or 6-month shelf life. And in a situation like that, if you bring me the recipe, there's a NDA that both of us sign and nobody knows that I'm making it for you. And the label says produced for or produced exclusively for whatever business it is. As far as packaging design, there's options there too. We have access to lots of different material as far as glass and plastics and stuff like that. Sometimes I'll give you my input on what I think is better for your product. It may be a little bit more expensive, or the packaging you may want may be cost prohibitive. So that works both ways. And then from a design piece, we can help with that. We have some people, but this day and age, everybody knows a designer, right? So we kind of give you the parameters of that jar, and then how much real estate you're going to have for a label. And, you make that, we make that label up. Sometimes I buy the label. Sometimes they provide them to me. There's lots of different options. There's not a one size fits all, but we can put just about anything that you've seen on a store shelf before and make that a reality. One thing that we're not doing is as much mayonnaise based stuff like we used to. We like to do hot fills.
So describe that. So a mayonnaise based product is a cold fill. And you're dealing with eggs, which deals with certain type of diseases and bacterias.
Right.
So break that down. Why are you only doing hot fill? Okay.
So with a cold pack, let's say something that's really popular these days is like a Mississippi comeback sauce, right?
Yep.
We used to make one for a customer years ago, and that product is very heavily mayonnaise based. You can't heat it because mayonnaise is a lot of eggs and it breaks and separates.
Well, then at a certain temperature point, disease starts to attack the eggs, correct?
Well, and here's the thing. So the temperature, when you're cooking something, heating it, what you're wanting to do in manufacturing, food manufacturing, is providing some type of kill step, right? And even if it's not 100% kill step, it's something that's going to inhibit the growth of any kind of nefarious microorganism. So with hot fill, it's 180, 190 degrees. There is nothing that really can live in that temperature outside of the botulism spore.
So for a barbecue sauce, you're getting that to 185 degrees.
Yes, 185
hot
degrees.
Sauce, you're getting it to 190 degrees.
Okay, right. So they're all, and then the pH is important too. You want to have a pH below a 4.8
for hot sauces and for barbecue sauces.
Just about everything that's shelf stable, unless it's going through a pressurized canning system, because that at those temperatures, even at the 200 degrees, it won't destroy a botulism spore.
Okay.
And botulism is very unique in that it needs a pH of 4.8 or above to sporulate, and it has to be an anaerobic environment. Right?
We'll describe what that is.
So an anaerobic environment is an environment without oxygen. So we have sealed this hot jar of, let's say a salsa, because salsa is right there at the danger zone.
Okay.
Tomatoes, are right there around that 4.8. You throw in a jalapeno, which is
so it's going to increase the pH level and the acidity. So does that have a rise to do with the pH levels, the acidity of the product?
Yeah. So the pH of tomatoes are kind of low, but onions and jalapenos are not low.
Yeah. So I just have a funny story since you're talking about tomatoes and jalapenos. I was a line chef at a catering kitchen for my college, and we would cook 500 to 1,000 burritos in like an hour and a half. And so we had 3 line chefs cooking, doing all this like live action fire and stuff. And that's where I actually learned about food. And I didn't know this was a thing, but if you put olive oil into a pan, tomatoes, the acid starts building up. And then if you add jalapenos after the boiling point, massive fire, and the liquid starts to spark, basically. And it got into my eye, and it burnt the inside of my eyelid. That's the first time I realized that you can make a full weapon out of tomatoes and jalapenos.
Throw it in the oil, huh?
Just throw it in the oil. So that was a learning experience for me. Yeah.
So I do sometimes I do that in controlled circumstances at the restaurant. Like if I'm wanting to get a good video,
get
a little bit of oil and
add the tomatoes and then jalapeno.
Because that moisture in there and it automatically flames up. So sometimes for effect, if somebody's shooting a video or something, I'm like, here, let's do this.
Yeah. And I just don't think most people know that. I learned the hard way.
Well, and you learn at home too.
Yeah.
Do that. It can be very dangerous.
That's what causes a massive amount of house fires. And people just
no water. That's why you don't throw water on there. That's that exact reaction that you have with water.
That's why you need baking soda.
Baking soda, a towel.
Well, have you seen the new? We were just going off, but have you seen the fire blankets?
I have seen them.
I have 2 at my house. It sits on my fridge. If there's a fire, you throw the blanket off, it kills the fire immediately because it destroys all the oxygen in the area.
That's all. That's what it needs, oxygen.
That's all it needs, and that's how fire spreads. All right, so let's get back into the pH level
so pH
of tomatoes and jalapenos.
So the lower the pH, the more acidic something is. So the safe, and also kind of the more safe and the longer the shelf life of this product will be, right? Hot sauce, extremely safe. It's 3 ingredients usually: peppers, vinegar, and salt, and a pretty good amount of vinegar to pepper ratio, right? So the pH of a hot sauce is going to be like a 2.8.
So I just had a hot sauce. This is from the Try Guys, and it was it was like a salsa verde type sauce. I would love to have this product as an Explore Nash product too, eventually. But so they had the hot sauce. It had raisins in the hot sauce and dates. But like it was so balanced and sweet but spicy. Like it was amazing. I have to get you a bottle.
So that's kind of like a chutney. So
when
you add these other things, they have other names like conserves or chutneys or preserves.
Yeah.
All of that is about what's inside of that jar. We'll get into that another time. But the food safety piece, if the pH is low, botulism can't form because the acidity is where it needs to be. The other thing that limits microbial growth is a low water availability. So like with jam and jelly, the reason it's so safe for so long is that while there's a lot of water when it starts with the fruits, the sugar, when the sugar melts into that hot liquid, it ties up all of the available liquid, right?
Okay.
So if you think about...
So if you have like, I know like in ice cream, like there's the air density rating in ice cream. So is it kind of like that for jellies and jams where it's like the water density to sugar ratio?
So there's a portion. So with jam, anything that is set, and I'm not going to say, I guess you can call it a gel, but when I think about those or congealed, you think more about a gelatin.
Mm-hmm.
Pectin is completely different than gelatin, which is an animal product. Pectin comes strictly from fruits. But there is a reaction that happens between the pH level, the amount of sugar, and the acidity, right? So so the acidity, the sugar, and the pectin form this cross-linking action. So a jelly and a jam needs to be, the pH is usually 3.3 or below. So that's where that needs to be. The sugar content generally needs to be about 55%.
Okay.
Right. So there's always going to be a little bit more sugar in a jam and jelly than there is actual fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The weight by 55%, that's the weight of the sugar to the weight of the produce to be able to make that gel happen. If you don't have that, you have more of a fruit syrup.
Okay.
Because it won't achieve that gel.
Mm-hmm.
It'll still be thick and it'll still be safe and have a pretty good shelf stability, but it won't be as spreadable, right?
Okay. So with that in mind, I know this answer, but I can't remember it right now. What's the difference between a jelly and a jam?
So jam is whole fruit. Jam and preserves are very closely related in that it's all of the fruit. It's just jammed into the jar.
Oh, so it's the innards, it's the seed, it's the skin. Okay.
And preserves are the same way, except you don't do any kind of the mashing or stirring up. You're trying to preserve the whole fruit
into little chunks.
In its natural state, kind of, right?
Yep.
So the recipes can be very similar with like a preserve and a jam, except you're just not blending it up, right?
Okay.
Jelly is nothing but fruit juice. That's why they're clear. So it would have all the seeds, all the pulp.
So are you pressing, so on the fruit juice with the jelly, so you're pressing the fruit to get all the liquid from the juice?
We don't make any jellies.
Okay.
Everything we've got, even what we call a pepper jelly, is still whole fruit in there. It just looks like a jelly because it's kind of clear from the vinegar that's in there.
Okay.
If it was true to name, it would really be a pepper jam.
Okay.
But the nomenclature, everybody's adapted is pepper jelly.
Yeah.
And not to try to change whatever on everybody's mind. That's why we call it jelly, because it's kind of transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And so jellies will always be kind of transparent. The reason we don't make it, because most of the commercially available jellies that you see out there start with like a concentrated fruit syrup.
Yeah, that's not good for you.
No, right? So then they add water and more sugar.
Yep, and that's not good for you at all.
No. Yeah. And so you've got this really manufactured product that usually has a pretty lengthy amount of ingredients. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about like our jams and jellies.
Oh, it's like 4 ingredients.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah. That's the thing that really stood out to me when we filmed. We have a YouTube video on the co-packing facility and on the restaurant. We haven't even gotten to that topic yet, but we will. Is your ingredient list on a bottle of ketchup? It's 3 ingredients or 4 ingredients for a ketchup. For your barbecue sauce, it was like, I think, 6 ingredients for some barbecue sauces?
And it depends on whose barbecue sauce it is.
But like your jams and jellies, like 5 ingredients. And I'm like, I know what every single one of those things are. I don't have to go look up a Google Translate and learn how to read this science word.
Right.
Yeah. Talk about in the co-packing. Let's talk about the ketchup. So I had your jalapeno ketchup. I've been eating that on eggs, which is amazing with the spice. Just talk about your ketchup for a second.
So there's a couple different iterations.
And then we could talk about the pH level of that with the tomatoes and everything else that's going on with the ketchup.
There's a couple different iterations of the ketchup. Some of it starts with whole peeled Italian style tomatoes, right? And some of those are canned, right? They will come in, those will be, and that first ingredient will be tomatoes and salt, and then they're packed. And that's like a San Marzano tomato. That is that is the Rolls Royce of sauce tomatoes. You hear a lot of people talk about Roma tomatoes. Yep. San Marzanos are the best tasting, most full flavored, rich tomato. So that's the start. And then vinegar and sugar and jalapenos. Onion powder is almost in every single ketchup because it really, you don't even detect it, right, with the other flavors that are in there, but it really adds to the kind of umami of ketchup. It would be the difference, when you think about tasting like a tomato sauce straight off the shelf, that is kind of without anything in it. It's like, it's okay, but it's not great. Yep. Those few simple ingredients, a little bit of salt, a little bit of onion powder, really set ketchup off.
Have you found any inspiration in like the Heinz family or the Hershey family, or I've been watching through some of these documentaries, the Kellogg's family, like very fascinating stories. Have you found any inspiration from like those bigger entrepreneurs that built these massive worldwide brands?
So for me, because I got started in jam and jelly, J.M. Smucker was really, and to see this guy was selling jam and jelly in these kind of stone crocks when he started off the back of a wagon, and now it's everywhere. So you do take a lot of inspiration from those kind of things. I had worked in manufacturing for a long time in my former life. That's what I did, is I represented manufacturers. Always fascinated by it, and I think that's why I ended up here. It started in 5th grade. Junior achievement was a thing back then, and I remember the first thing we ever did in junior achievement is we assembled ink pens.
Yep.
And it was a thing where there was an assembly line and there was one person building pens, and which was going to be the faster. And that was where I learned that Henry Ford, was the master of the assembly line and the guy that really got it started. And that's kind of where my love for like seeing people that had these ideas and just put them together and then made these products that impacted so many people's lives. Jam and jelly, I don't think has that kind of impact, but just.
Oh, it does on a good piece of toast. Absolutely.
But to go to in the way that I always used to say this when I was at farmers markets, tastes like summer in a jar, right? So if you can go in January when the leaves are all kind of dead and open a jar of strawberry jam and it smells like strawberries and it tastes like strawberries that have just been picked, I guess it does have an impact.
Yeah.
So learning about how those people have grown and then the kind of the state of the way the grocery stores are today, it's very hard for people to get in to break into those places. And at times we've been in Whole Foods or Publix on the shelves next to these guys. That feels like a huge feather in your cap, I made it.
What's that process like getting into grocery?
It varies depending on the grocery store. Like with Whole Foods, initially there was a third-party audit that had to happen. So they used at the time, it was UL Everclean. They would come in. And basically it's like a Department of Agriculture inspection on steroids, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, the Department of Agriculture is making sure that you're doing everything the right way and not going to get anybody sick and checking pHs and looking at kill steps. These guys they take it a little bit further with your processes and your recalls and how if you had to implement a recall that there's traceability in place and how do you do that? While the Department of Agriculture looks at that stuff, they really kind of dig into it a little bit deeper. And then they say, okay, this product passes all the tests to get put on your store shelves. Then there's other smaller grocery stores where you show them that you have a manufacturing certificate or permit in the state of Tennessee, and then also a liability insurance policy, and that's enough for them.
Okay.
So there's
it just depends on the grocery store.
It depends on the grocery store. The biggest thing with grocery stores, to get a huge portion of them is more difficult because the distributors they work with are pretty tied into the Heinz's and the JM Smuckers.
Of course.
So that is a harder nut to crack, I guess, if you want to have anything outside of a local or regional distribution. And that's kind of why I went down the food service path. It was a little easier.
So we'll get to the food service path here in just a few minutes. What's been your major success in co-packing?
Just sometimes getting a phone call and somebody asking you, can you do this? And you're like,
let me figure it out.
well, I never answer with that. Yes.
Hey, sometimes you have to answer like that.
Yes. I'm like, yes, we can do it. Let me figure it out. Usually how that starts is, no, you just get something from them, make sure that you're able to do that. But the biggest win is like, looking at the person that's working there with you. In my case, it's like the plant manager and being like, holy smokes, like this is so-and-so. They're wanting us to make their barbecue sauce. And, like that kind of, those are big wins for me. And then I guess after that, now you get the order.
Yeah.
Now you got to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trying to figure out that piece, like we have one customer that buys everything in 5-gallon buckets and they order 1,000 gallons at a time. You know what I mean? Making a bottle of barbecue sauce is one thing. Making
5 gallons,
making 1,000 gallons of barbecue sauce is another.
That's a good problem to figure out.
It is, and it's fun, And so you start. The funny thing is, like in this kind of business, you cut your teeth on making the product and understanding the science, and then you start to become a logistics guy.
Yep.
Right? Like, how are we moving this around the country? You start wearing all these hats that you didn't even know you were ever going to have to put on.
Yeah, that's entrepreneurship.
And it's right. And you know firsthand. Yeah. Like, it's like whack-a-mole. You think you've got something solved, and then something else pops up over here, and you're like, whoa, this is a lot. But then the thing is, at the end of it's the whole entrepreneurship is the old saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So over the years, like, I feel like, well, we've done pretty good. But when I really sit back and look at, like, all the products we've made, the places that we've gone, the people that have been our customers, it's a pretty good sized body of work. But you don't realize it in the time. You're just getting up and going to work, and then after several years pass, you've got a pretty good legacy behind you. And that's a big win too. That's a fun piece.
Since we talked about the success, let's also talk about the failure. What's been a failure that you've experienced and learned from in co-packing?
Trying to sell somebody on a well, not really trying to sell them on it. There was a time when glass was
very expensive.
It was expensive, yeah. And it was in short supply.
Yep.
So the polypropylene or the oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on the glass, but the clear glass, the PET glass, is an option, and it's got hot fill capabilities, right?
Yeah.
But the top end of those hot fills is like 175, maybe 180. And glass is way higher.
Yeah.
So if you've got a kettle that's temperature is kind of fluctuating a little bit, for us, it's okay for us to be on the higher end, right?
Well, it's probably better from a food safety standpoint.
Yeah, right. You know that there's a huge kill step there, right? Yeah. And it's going to stay hot for a long time after you box it up, and so it works out okay. To get some orders, these people needed product. The PET, we start filling them, and everything's going great. And then all of a sudden, they're starting to turn into bananas.
The glass.
Oh, the plastic. Yeah.
Oh, the plastic. Okay. Yeah.
And now all you have to put this stuff in
is plastic.
It's plastic, and you're watching all this product go into these plastic bottles, and the shoulders are straightening out.
Yeah. Then you have all that, and then you have all that microplastic in your product,
and you're tied up in, and you're like, what do we do with this? Like, we got to let it cool to put it back in, or how do we fix this problem? Do we scrap it until we can get? That's a big issue. Most of the stuff that has happened that are learning curves are just being able to have a little bit of redundancy in whatever equipment it is that you're using, right? You have a huge order. and we've got a bank of stainless steel kettles. Sometimes we need all of them to fill these orders. And if you have something go down,
then you're delayed. They're probably the client is expecting a shipment.
The one thing with food service is this: they needed it yesterday.
Yep.
Right. And having a restaurant and living in that world, you know that it's really, really hard when a restaurant runs out of something that's a key thing for them. So if we're their barbecue sauce provider and we have stuff that goes down, in fact, I'm working with a big one here. And they want to know contingency plans, how much stuff we're going to carry, an inventory to back up in case. What do we do in case the factory burns down? And these are big guys. So
I got asked that the other day. They're like, "What are you gonna do if you die?" And I'm like, "That's a problem for the team to figure out when that happens."
They'll cross that bridge when they come to
hopefully, I'll cross that bridge for a few years, like another 40 years,
right?
But it's good because they're so big. They have to have that contingency plan of, hey, can we still fulfill?
Right, and that's an exciting place to be.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned food service. So you start the co-packing and then it evolved into you having a restaurant, and then you opened a restaurant in Berry Hill, originally called the Nashville Jam Company. You have rebranded that. It's now called Farmstead Nashville.
That's correct.
What's a major success that you've had in the restaurant world? And also there's not many operators in Tennessee, just so you guys know. There's not many operators in Tennessee that are doing packaging and the restaurant world. Gary is one of maybe a very small handful of people.
Yeah, I can think of maybe one other one, and they're not completely involved in the packaging anymore.
Okay.
They kind of sold that off.
So you may be the only person in the state that's doing this.
One.
Yeah.
Huge or good successes in the restaurant. They happen all the time. When someone comes in, and it's happened a lot lately. In fact, this past weekend, there was 3 people that said, "This is the best breakfast I've ever had."
That's a great compliment.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing because there's a lot of competition.
What did they have?
You know what? I don't even know.
Oh.
I do know. One of the things they had were grits. They were like, "Oh, these are the best grits I've ever had." And I was like, we get that a lot. Those people were from Paducah, Kentucky, traveling down here for something. And then this is the best breakfast I've had since I've been in Nashville. To hear that is always a good feeling. I take a lot of pride in the food. So the other thing that I love to hear is that, man, it feels like home when we come in here. The staff was very friendly and accommodating because there for a while, I did not have that. That is probably the most difficult piece of the restaurant world, is especially immediately following COVID, and really not just immediately, like 4 years after COVID. I feel like that there's been a little bit of some of that's balanced out now. Finding good people that enjoyed coming to work and really enjoyed being the face of a brand. And really understanding what it is that they were doing, and how they impacted the world around them as far as that restaurant's concerned, or these people's experience. And seeing how that's changed in the last couple of years, I feel like that's a major win. There was a point where, because I know you're going to ask about failures, that was the one. Like, there were days that I just wanted to jump off a bridge. I'm not kidding. I was like, blow out the pilots.
Which, if people don't know what that means, look it up on Google,
right?
And then you may get flagged on Google.
We're not going to get into that. But there was a time where, like, oh my gosh, this is the life I chose for myself.
Was that because of overcommitment to, like, providing good food? Was that because of lack of people working for you, or just was it so stressful from a financial standpoint? You're like, I have all of this into this food, and I'm not getting a return at all.
It was the human element. It wasn't the customers and that part of the equation. It's the staff. Finding people that really just gave a crap. They just, for it was like I had the perfect storm of terrible employees, and which followed feel like the perfect storm of the best staff that I could have ever asked for. So the line of demarcation was great.
So what advice in that process, what advice would you give to a operator that's in the hiring stages? Or that is, I guarantee you, every operator is always hiring, especially in the food service business. Because the turnover rate in this city is so freaking high. So how do you hire?
I just had this conversation with somebody earlier today, and one of the upper echelon people from Chick-fil-A came in to our restaurant, say, I think probably 3 years ago. And he wrote me a letter telling me what a fantastic job we were doing.
That's a great compliment from, yeah.
Well, he came back a year and a half later. And the second letter I got was not the same as the first. And, but
so it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it hurt my feelings. The first one, you're on cloud nine, like this guy's been a part of something that there are people lined up all times of day to get in there.
Across the country.
Their service is second to none.
The only other people I think are better is Ritz and Discount Tire.
Right.
But like Discount Tire is like the Chick-fil-A of the tire business.
Right.
Yeah.
So to get a tip of the cap from somebody in that organization near the top was great. But he told me, he said something in the second letter that I think that everybody should hear. You regret not hiring the right people, but you will regret not firing the right people more. Keeping people around, maybe because of a personal relationship or a tie that is not good for the health of your business, will impact you far greatly than not hiring the perfect person the first time. So understanding when it is to cut ties with people. No one likes to fire people. You know what I mean? No one likes, that's not a fun part of any job. Even if they're a jerk, you still don't even really like to do it then. But getting rid of those people, because that viral effect of that bad people, it just eats its way through the whole crowd, Yep. And it's contagious. And you go ahead and you snip that off, and then all of a sudden this morale comes back, and you're like, wow, that really was that person. So you just have to understand when and who.
If a restaurant was getting, they're opening a concept in Nashville, what's 3 pieces of advice you would give them?
Don't do breakfast.
No, wait, why?
I don't need any more competition. They popped up all over the place.
It is, yeah.
We were there was not many games in town a few years ago, and now I'm like, holy!
It's like all these chains coming here, and yeah,
it's like, so Florida is the absolute birthplace of all of the breakfast concepts because it's old people and tourists, and what do? They eat breakfast, right? So like, if you open a breakfast concept in Florida and it's successful, it doesn't mean you have something good. It just means you open a breakfast concept in Florida. Then they're like, wow, we're making so much money here. We're going to go elsewhere. And it's like all the breakfast chains. And I think they've all moved here.
A lot of them have. And I think there's a lot more coming.
I think so too. I do business with one. I'm not allowed to say because it's a non-disclosure agreement type thing. They did not come here, and they've got their multi-unit group. They didn't come here because real estate is so expensive.
Yeah. Well, I heard from an operator that there's a place in downtown Nashville that wanted $157 per square foot. You as an operator, yeah, that is a lot. That's New York City prices. We're not New York City.
No. Well, and a piece of, like a piece of the math you have to figure out, like, so when you look at your restaurant and how many seats you have in there, a really good way to break things down and figure out the numbers is how much is each one of those seats going to generate in a day?
Yeah.
Right. And if you're in this $157 square and that's your chair, that's hard.
That is a very hard transition.
That's a hard per chair number to meet.
Yes.
Because lots of times you're talking, $40 or $50 a chair.
Which is still $40, $50 a square foot.
Right.
5 years ago was very expensive in this city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So second piece of advice towards somebody opening a restaurant in Nashville.
Hire well, do the work. I think because it was difficult for a while, people got in a really, there is some PTSD from now they just take everybody they can get through the door and they figure it out later. But part of the problem with that is you bring all these people in. I hear it from front of house staff all the time. We don't make the money we used to make. Everybody's overstaffed. But it's because everybody got so much PTSD from, I've got to put 15 people on today to get 10 to show up. Right?
Yep.
And so maybe we'll see a correction in that trend. Everybody's, here's your 2-table section. Because we don't know if you're going to show up tomorrow. So just hire right on the front end. Do your homework. And first impressions are not always. I used to think, first impression. Man, there are some sneaky people out there. You got to work with them for a little while, and if they're not the right person, let them go. And two, I guess don't overspend on real estate. It's a really hard piece to understand. A lot of people, too, especially if they're new into the restaurant game, it's one thing if it's somebody that's been doing this for a long time. They understand all the metrics. Going back to the people. Sometimes people look at a restaurant space and say, wow, that's $10,000 a month. That seems like a lot. Your staff is going to cost you way more than that.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. And they don't realize
especially if you have a low retention rate on your staff, your turnover rate's high, your training, depending on, your volume, your payroll is going to be more than that a week. You know what I mean? So, make evaluations about what it's going to make evaluations about what it's going to take to run that restaurant. Everybody, I think, does it on the lower end. Well, this guy can do this, or I can do so much of this. I can do this. And then they do this labor model and it's way wrong. For it to be successful, they have to have all these other people. And now what they've predicted in their weekly expense as far as payroll is concerned, it's twice that. And why do these restaurants go out of business so frequently? They're undercapitalized on the front end because they prepared for something that they were not prepared to take on. You know what I mean? We've got some money set aside until we get going. And then when the meter's running the wrong way in the restaurant business, it runs fast. Okay.
And that's the thing too. It's not like, oh, we'll limp along. You're talking about tens of thousands of dollars going this direction. That doesn't take very long to sink a lot of people, especially if they're an independent restaurant person and don't have gazillions of dollars backing them up.
All right. So this may be controversial depending how you answer this. You grew up here in Nashville.
I did.
What's for you, what's one thing that you miss about old Nashville? And what's one thing that you enjoy about new Nashville?
This is going to be controversial. So Nashville's still a friendly place. It's not as friendly as when I grew up here. That was the days of somebody sitting on the side of the road with a flat tire and 3 people stopped to help them. And I feel like not just unique to Nashville, the Southeast as a whole. As we've grown and we've had other influences, we've lost a little bit of our friendliness. So I hate that piece, because years ago it felt like everybody you met, you'd known all your life. That piece I obviously dislike. But what I really do like, there's a lot of options now. Like, fine dining, as a guy that's a food guy, I mean, when I was growing up here, you had Ruth's Chris and Jimmy Kelly's.
Hey, Jimmy Kelly's is a great place.
It is fantastic. I ate there not long ago. You had Sperry's. You had a handful, right? Now, in a probably
a 1 mile radius, there's like 30 of them.
Yes, and it's insane. I used to, before I even got fully on into the restaurant business, when something new opened, I felt like I went.
Yeah. Well, now you can't because there's literally 5,000. The week of us recording this podcast, there's 4 restaurants opening this week.
Right.
And they're all concepts from other cities. So they're a repeat of other cities from New Orleans or New York.
Right.
And so you can't, in what we do, we definitely can't go check out all these new places. I don't want to.
Right.
Hey, we have an Explore Nash approved product. You can reach out to us and we'll give you some more information. I need to sell. So,
right.
Okay. So you like the different options from a standpoint of living here into where Nashville is going. Are we growing too fast?
I feel like traffic says yes sometimes, but then when you, because if you've lived here before and you knew traffic in old Nashville.
Oh, it's a 20-minute town. Everywhere you go, it's 20-minute town.
It was great. Yeah. But now, but we still don't have the traffic problems like Atlanta. You go, so growing too fast. I don't know if we're growing too fast. I think, bigger concern is growing in the wrong direction. This was a very family friendly place.
And I don't think it is now.
And that's so years ago.
The Gaylord is but it's very hard for a family to have a really good time downtown or in Nashville. So
before basically my previous life, I used to travel all the time to sales meetings and stuff. And we would have trade shows or whatever and say like New Orleans, right? I go to New Orleans and be completely appalled, right? I never take my family here. There's none of my kids that I'm taking to New Orleans. Now, that being the French Quarter, because it's kind of seedy. Now you get out and you go to Metairie and really get into some of the other areas. That was great, right? But what New Orleans kind of became known for, downtown years ago, we had Mike's Ice Cream and stuff during the day. You could take the kids down there and it was fun, maybe walk around. But now people start drinking at 8:00 in the morning during the summertime. I have a 28-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old son. The 2 youngest ones, I really don't want anywhere near down there at all, because I just don't think there's an environment for kids. That being said, kind of the redevelopment of the restaurant brand with going into evenings, I want that to be a place where families can gather. Now you're getting some good food. There's some menu items that are kind of interactive.
The s'more things.
I didn't know if you want me to say it because you heard it.
The video's going to be up by then.
Because you heard it. But, the tableside s'mores and the stuff where you're really just a family unit and kind of interacting with one another, with the way kids are with devices and stuff. I think it's nice to have a family dinner where you're involved with one another.
Especially if you tell the kid, hey, you can catch on fire for not paying attention.
Right. Well, kids love fire.
When we were filming that, I know you're still beta testing stuff. I'm like, my beard's about to catch on fire and I'm not going to have a clue what's happening. I'm going to be like, oh, it's really hot in here.
Well, we've determined that we need to put a little less ethanol gel in those burners.
Victor, let's clip that just for this podcast, just to show my reaction to that fire. So with all of that in mind, what's one business that you would love to shout out besides yours?
One business I would love to shout out besides mine. Oh man, this is really difficult. One of them is Made in TN.
It's a great business.
They're in all the hot spots. They're a place where you can find all of Nashville's stuff that the guys like me and others have, producers, everything from clever hats and clothing and stuff. You know, it's like a gift shop, but it's not it's
not a tacky gift shop.
No, it's not tacky at all.
Yeah.
It's really high end quality stuff. All Tennessee, and a lot of Middle Tennessee, Nashville stuff. So that's a shout out.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Where can people reach out to you for the co-packing, and where can people come and check out your food?
I tell you what, can we put a link somewhere on your website?
Yeah, we can.
We'll do
that's
that.
easy.
We'll do that. I really don't want to give out my phone number.
You don't have to give out your phone number. Yeah. We can do the link on the website.
There'll be a lot of prank calls later.
Hey, there may be some good prank calls.
Right,
they turn into business.
Well, I tell you what, if you're calling to buy something or have me make something for you, I will always answer that call. It's what we do.
All right. Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.